use, and they started making their own production. And now it's like the third year that they're on it. You can go a bit down. And then, yeah, so basically they started doing local linkages. If you're familiar with the idea of linkages, supply chain linkages, forward and backward linkages, you start to create a type of, sorry, it's gonna go down. Just wanna show you here. Here, so where the businesses are. Takes a while to load. Here we go. So this is Femel, the one I was talking about. There's also, people who do different types of foraging to teach people about how to, get food from the regions around Berlin. We also have another business that's called Roots Radicals. What they do is they do a form of upcycling where a lot of the supply chains of food today create a lot of waste. So going back to this idea of entropy and so on, like they basically make a business out of taking all the food that otherwise will rot and turn it into really nice food and products that people can use. And they also get their food from local farmers. So we've been starting to do this type of credit window guidance in a way where we're trying to build these local supply chain linkages. Of course, in a very punk rock way, but still, it kind of shows you the challenges of doing something like that in the middle of the capital of Germany, which is in many ways at the center of a big economic network. So yeah, I just wanted to show that to you quickly and then go back here. So this is a picture of two moments in the Circles network. The first moment is from, you could say, October 2020, which is when we launched it in Berlin and in the world, up until January 2022. So the blue dots represent people, users. You can even see like a cluster there on the top. That's probably a bot network that was created there on the top. The green dots are businesses, and the red dots are basically trade partners that the businesses have. And then the way we are running this type of strategy with Circles is that from the business perspective, here on the second side, you see it more clearly. Like we are doing a process where we are subsidizing specific businesses or also giving credit to specific businesses as a way to develop the local production, local capacity, and then also for them to give their products and services for the currency, and then trade. So there is some B2B trade going on, but also trade that goes on between partners that are subsidized and none. So in red, and then the people who are using their basic income to spend on this sort of productive investment are in blue. So next slide, please. And this is this preliminary graph of like how like the different colors represent different business sectors. So in red is the food sector, which is the one that we're focusing on the most. And here you see the growth from one moment to the other of how we are slowly leveraging on the different food sectors to like grow this local regional. And the green circle at the middle is the Circles Cooperative, which is the organization that we set up with Blanca and my other comrades here to run this system. Next slide, please. And here's some numbers, since you asked. So the numbers means the people on Circles. So right now, I would say we have about, say, 2,000 people using the system. Also, the amount of subsidy partners are 18. The amount of people that trade with the subsidy partners are about 505. The number of unique trade partnerships would be the equivalent of edges. In this case, it means if there is a relationship between two different people, it counts as one. Doesn't matter how much they trade. Then the volume of transactions you see there, it's denominated in circles. And yeah, it's if you're a network science geek, the sort of the business partner and the businesses are within the weekly connected component. And we are doing this via a group that we set up called NetFi, Network Science and Financial Diaries, with Teodoro Cricione, who will be here on Friday, basically trying to do an analysis where we can mix network science with anthropology as a way to basically destroy economics and make something that is actually useful. So next slide, please. So now I want to maybe just draw a bit back on the idea that Alex was saying and also on the Demirash idea. One thing is, the Minsky idea. No, anyone can issue their own currency. The hard part is getting others to accept it. But the other question that no one asks is, how is money actually destroyed? Right, and I think this is an important question. We were talking a bit about this with Thomas yesterday, and I want to talk about it in the case of a historical example that I'm doing research on that I wanted to share with you, since I'm writing this for a book, through this idea that was from anthropology, that we say that value is what brings universes into being. So I think I forgot. It was 2 in the morning. I forgot to bring in the middle. So value is what brings universes into being. This is an essay by David Graeber as well. You can read it on the anthropology theory of value, which is where I get this stuff from. Basically, the idea that value is how we give meaning to our own actions, and then the money tokens, money units, money objects that we use are a way of. Thank you so much. Are a way of bringing that into being. So I'll talk a bit about cacao. So this is next slide, please. I think slideshow. Slideshow there.
Oh, yeah.
No, there. Next slide, please. So here, this is what in today's terms you would call the money supply. So in like dark green are the places where cacao production happened or happens still today. I also call it the means of the production of money. So what is the materiality of the stuff that makes your money? In the case of the Mesoamerican region, cacao was a currency that was used from the Olmec times through the Mayan and also to the Mexica Aztec trifecta until Hernan Cortés came and stole a bunch of cacao fields and thereby destroying the whole value system and money system that they had. It was used for trade. So the way it worked was that there was a merchant class of people that believed in the god of commerce and cacao. His name is Ekchua. He was, one of the lords of the underworld, also the god of commerce and the god of cacao. So there is a relationship between reincarnation, between death and money, in this case, in the sense also that this is a currency that you can only store for maximum a year. And the Mayans especially had very nice ways of storing the cacao to keep it and to use it, because it was while the merchant classes would take their cacao and trade with other villages, other places in like interregional trade. They came back with a lot of goods and stuff from different places, feathers, food, many things. And then there was a sort of a potlatch, if you're familiar with what that is. Not exactly a potlatch, but a way where the community could get together and then share the spoils of what the merchant class were doing. And I think then we need to talk a bit about, next slide, please. What you could do with this money, right? So cacao was a sort of unit of account. And it was, for example, in here you can see that you could, with one cacao, with 100 cacaos, you could buy a turkey, you could buy 3 rabbits, more or less 33 avocados, 33 fishes, and 100 tomatoes. So it was actually a means of payment, a way to settle, debts as well. But I think it's important to also go back to what Paolo and the others were saying the other day, is that, a money system necessitates a mathematical theory or a mathematical logic behind. And the Mayans had a politics and mathematics where, they had 3 calendars, and the calendars were used either to count the long cycles of how not just the Earth goes around the sun, but also how the sun goes around the galaxy. But also they had calendars for agriculture production, right? So if you think about your money supply as embedded in a cycle where you can only harvest it twice a year, and then you have to use it for exchange to get the stuff you need and create a sort of commercial network, a huge commercial network, probably equivalent to how the Persians were doing it back in the day, based on the 20. So the Mayan number system is using the base 20. And so in every cycle of 20, basically you have to multiply 20 by 20. So the taxes, in this example here, this is from the Aztec tribute list. You were demanding, Moctezuma was demanding around 200 loads of cacao beans from a specific region, which is a multiple, in like actual weight was about 8,000 kilograms of cacao. So it's a multiple of the 20 numbering system. That sort of,
Catalyze everything else. And I think in here it's important to say what. Okay.
Interesting.
Extra. Yeah. Well. All right. Okay, maybe this is.
Getting interesting. So here I want to talk about. Is it the battery? No. It's probably the God. Cool. So I think the important thing here to say is the zero was very fundamental to all of this, because in the Mayan calendar there's this idea that time is a spiral, and often the symbol or the glyph for the zero is actually a shell. But sometimes people think that it was also cacao. This is some Russian theorists thinking about this, but not entirely sure. But the idea is, the zero was used to signify changes in different cycles of length. And if you think about it, if you have a rotting money, the way you relate to time is in more longer cycles, because value the present. Well, anyways, I don't want to get too much into it. I think the point is to say that we need a different mathematics to be able to think about different money systems today. And the politics of mathematics really matter, especially now that we're enmeshing all the cryptography and the proofs and so on. And these are fundamental to how we produce our currencies. So I just want to give you this thought so we can think together about how could we envision and create a type of mathematics that is supportive of the types of credit relationships that we want to make with each other. And that's my presentation. Thank you. So, questions?
I'm always interested in mesh credit systems in terms of topology and substructures. Obviously, if it's a scale-free network, and you directly alluded to 6 degrees of separation, then there are rich connectors, and they're always the cheapest route, very likely to always be the cheapest route so they'll get richer. So you have a sort of, in a scale-free network, if you don't exert management, which obviously with your credit window thing, you're exerting some sort of management control, you're going to have an emergent property that comes out of that, which is unequal, strongly unequal. So that's one thing. The other thing is we used to have mesh networks. The people who did what Hans Florin teaches us was called scontration. The people at the end of the credit fairs, they were building mesh networks for circular clearing. Out of that system arose the banks through a coincidence of two things. One, information asymmetry. Those clerks at the end of the trade fairs, after a little while, began to realize they knew much more than any merchant about the structure of the economy. And information became power. Yeah. They organized the system, as Ethan told us, to make sure that there was a balance of trade, but that meant that they made the profit. Yeah. So they organized the system for their own good, probably often telling themselves that it was for the good of the merchants as well. I'm not ascribing moral issues. I'm talking about structural inherent tendencies. This is what concerns me. I'm not really, there are bad people all the time in every network. They always have to be managed. There are people who are well-intentioned but foolish. They have to be managed. There are people who are badly intentioned but do the right thing by mistake. All of these things exist. What matters is the structural tendencies, because I'm pretty much, those will be the things that happen unless great attention is paid. So you had these two things. One, you had this information asymmetry, but it was married to a sort of high priest technical capacity. the ability to do the art of exchange was limited to a very few people. And it was also very boring and nerdy, much less fun than trading books, or, knowing about, the price of fish and talking to people and, having your relationships and getting drunk with people so they would give you a good deal. That's interesting. Sitting down saying, who owes who 10? So you get this weird thing where you get this technocratic high priesthood who are experts at doing a thing, and they also have an information asymmetry. And I always look at mesh networks and I think banks are going to arise here because of people who want to manage the system. So you're managing the system. You have excellent intentions. You care deeply, but still you're a technocratic elite in a position of massive information asymmetry across the network. How does that not over time become something that is not horizontal?
Yeah.
Is my question. Sorry, that was a very long question.
No, it's a very good point. So yeah, I'm an anthropologist, and I the way I describe the crypto world that I'm enmeshed in right now is as a type of crypto feudalism. No, so you have the crypto kings, the barons, and many people, the witches and the mages that don't know about cryptography and all these systems. I have no idea how to code. I'm just I'm an activist. I'm not technically savvy in that sense, but I do see it very clearly that knowledge is power in this case. No, information is power. There are ways to address this. I think first of all we have to think always about how we have to have a class consciousness not in a Marxist sense, but in a sense of saying we need to acknowledge the knowledge differentials that are in this room versus the ones that are in the rest of the planet when we're thinking about money, to then figure out ways of decentralizing, democratizing that knowledge, so that people can feel it, can use it, and can know how to, deploy their own systems in a way that is easy for them, in a way that is, if they want to do it and if they want to create their own infrastructures. I think that's important, the democratization of knowledge, because knowledge should be shared. It shouldn't be something that is just proprietary. On the topic of information, I think it's a very important thing, and it's not just about if a specific crypto techno king or whatever is holding knowledge. It's also about who can see the network, because we run a blockchain. A blockchain is super transparent, so we see this as a problem in the sense of saying that what if a state comes, or what if a specific power structure comes eventually and tries to mess with that network? How to make sure that no one is nudging this idea, no? So, coming from this idea of unconditionality in basic income, for me, and also for us now, we've been thinking a lot about anonymity, on privacy preserving technologies, using cryptography and complex mathematics to be able to hide the traffic, the function, the client, like the different levels of the stack, so that you can still transact and have knowledge and prove things about the things that you're doing, but in a privacy preserving way. So that at least in that sense, the information, I am not even knowing, the stuff I showed you is because I'm doing the research and we have consent from the partners and so on. But again, to avoid this type of structural things from emerging, we are now thinking about how to anonymize the circle's web of trust and also the credit relations to sort of avoid this type of knowledge differential, so that you only know your local trust graph, so to say, but no one has the God's eye view, which is, I think, what leads to this problem that you're saying as well. And then, the democratization of knowledge, I think, is essential, and we always have to be conscious about it, because, it's highly specialized people here. There's mathematicians, there's technologists, there's, so I think it's very important to think about that, not to make another high priest class.
There's some things there I think need to be opened up.
You have questions here? You can move the mic around.
I just wanted to add that we have to understand that money is just one question, right? And what you're referring to is the political question. For example, they are doing, let's say, the window guidance maybe as a cooperative, right? So there are democratizing the decision making, and we will always have institutions, right? Money institutions. I don't think that money can be separated from the political realm. And we need to think how we democratize the window guidance and how we democratize the communities so they can have an effect that, yeah, we need more money creation here.
Hello? Oh, yeah. So I had actually a follow-up question to what Till said. So, okay, you sort of answered partly. So I was going to ask, what are you going to do to prevent from someone seeing the entire network? But my question is actually, I think that the emergence of bankers to some extent is a very positive thing for a network like that. But it would be not the bankers who come from viewing the entire network, but from bankers, essentially, you could call them, maybe you could call them pub owners, okay? People who know stuff, who do the legwork. I mean, in 1970, 71, I think, I forget which year, was a big banking bank closure in Ireland for about 6 months. And people, the economy continued, people wrote IOUs, and the pub owners became very important, because when people wanted to know whom they could trust, here's a new business partner, can I accept his check? They went to the local pub and asked the publican, right? Because he knew, and in a system like that, the person who accepts to do credit conversion is essential. And so the person who goes around and knows whose credit is what, can I trust them, who does the work, is super essential, whereas the business person may be a bit lazy and not give enough, not know enough, okay? So these sort of small local bankers, I'll call them, local publications, are actually very important. And you should, my question is, do you have a plan to actually, help the emergence of these local bankers?
Yeah, so in circles, we are beginning to call people like this ambassadors, or like people, or like, yeah, essentially the pub meisters, like someone who knows a specific network, a hub in a specific region, and wants to like do this type of organizing work, because there's a lot of organizing work that we haven't spoken about, that it requires to actually make this happen. There's so much work that goes into like making a type of network like this, that it wouldn't just happen just because we click a button. And I think that is very important to always remember. It's not just the technical labor, it's also the care labor that brings this into being. I see the other questions.
I was just going to point out that this changes people's relationship with fraud, that in our economy right now, we are interacting all the time with people that we have zero trust with. That's kind of the point of how money works. And so in that situation, taking advantage of total strangers is ethically justified and happens all the time. In a mesh network, if you have a fraudulent transaction, you're taking advantage of your friends, and that's certainly not ethically justified. And then there's immediate social repercussions for that. So just interesting to look at how that totally changes the way an economy might work.
I have a question about the window guidance. If I understood it correctly, it's like you set a minimum baseline of credit to be like basically promises to be made by the individuals in circles. So you're saying like, hey, everyone make at least one promise, and kind of like setting a minimum level of activity that you would desire?
Yeah, so basically we are going mostly to people who produce food and do some service, whether if it's therapy or massages, things like this. Specifically for producers, we say, if you accept circles, we can give you a buyback in euros. We can give you the ability to redeem a percentage of the circles that you accept for euros. And the other way around is also that we can give them direct like cash as a loan without interest, and say pay us back in circles as a way to do your business, as a way to get them into production, as a way to build up productive capacity so that they can start to make their beer, make their food, make their distribution, buy their bicycles, and so on. So it's basically, it's also a way of, I mean, if you're the Bank of Japan, you can just do the window guidance in
With
your own
regulation.
currency.
Or with like saying like you must, right? Like
Yeah.
regulate them. Like otherwise you're not a bank anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And they
Right.
tell to which industries to lend, and it's very like, more top down in this way. I think also it's in their own currency, and we have to, of course, enmesh it in the euro. So I think the strategy, and it's a question also for everyone, is how can you, leverage also the euro or the state money with the whatever mutual mesh credit system that you're using in a way that it supports the actual regional economy that you're working in.
How does it work? So if I have my personal circles and I want to pay someone else, how do I value that transaction for the service and in the Circle coin?
Yeah, so right now in Berlin, where we're on the pilot, when you pay someone, the prices, I didn't show the marketplace, but the prices are denominated in circles, which are being issued at the rate of 1 circle per hour. And the agreement right now, I think since July last year, is that 10 circles is equivalent to around €1, but people are sort of free to decide a bit. But at least it's important to have the anchor. We find, like, if you don't have a way to relate to measure, it's harder.
Do you find that people stick to that rate?
More or less, yeah.
So if I look at my network of trust, it's totally opposite of binary. There's some people I trust a lot. There's some people I trust a little. There's some people I trust in some situations, but not others. How does that play out in this ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I didn't mention this. Right now, when we design circles, we made what is now we considered it a not so good design choice, which is that when you trust someone, you're saying, I'm willing to accept their money, but up to half of the balance that they have. So we call that a trust limit. And we set it at like as a half of the balance. We should have done it in a more flexible way, but it was just, very early stuff. But the idea that you can choose and decide how much you want to trust whom, I want to go into debt with Alex up to 1,000, with Blanca up to 2,000, and so on. And so, right now it's fixed. We want to get rid of the limits and then have a more flexible way of people to choose that and to feel into that. But that's how it works right now.
So I understand the purpose of or how the window guidance will work, and I find it like a really powerful device. Yet I still don't understand the mechanics precisely. So I don't know if you could elucidate them. But particular reason I want to understand is, does the window guidance is defined globally, or can clusters in the network define their own window guidance heuristics?
Yeah, I mean, so in the case of the Central Bank of Japan, that was decided by the Japanese bureaucrats, right? We're taking that idea and saying, how can this work in a mesh where there are different local hubs that could decide this, no? And of course, there is the question about how to bring capital in for that type of investment. And that's also something we're thinking about. Also, how can you bring in productive investment for the development of the local infrastructure, so that you can decrease the cost of doing business, and sort of create the types of linkages that you want to see in your region, in your bioregion, no?
So, but there's documentation somewhere around to read how the window guidance specifically works. Is there any documentation I can refer to understand how the window guidance process works? How is it that you favor certain qualities of?
Yeah, of course. You can find all stuff online on the handbook.jointcircles.net.
Okay.
There we have our principles, how we organize it. We also have a lot of articles about how the subsidy program works and so on. If you want to go deeper into specifically window guidance for in general, I recommend read Princess of the Yen.
Do I understand that the window guidance is in the conversion to fiat money in that last leg?
Yeah, in the
okay. That
even
answers a
either
lot.
I give euros, then give back circles, or the other way around.
Do you prioritize different sectors? do you prioritize different sectors, like in the Japanese case, or not?
Yeah, food, mostly food, and like services, like basic services that people might give to each other, whether if it's care work, therapy, stuff like that, and food. Basically, food is what people want. You
And
know?
so you communicate this policy to all the nodes, or not?
We basically have a team that's called the CATS, the Community Activation Team, and the cats are in charge of meowing around the economy and basically figuring out the network. Okay, who knows who? Okay, there is this person that knows this farmer. How can we, you know? So it's very self-organized. It's kind of like finding the paths, you know. So yeah, but yeah, there could be some more structural ways of thinking about it. We're just doing it in a more sort of like this. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I think we should finish so we can have a little break and then we have time for the rest, unless there is one pressing question. Also, we can talk in the coffee and so on. And I'm happy to talk to Dil more about it. Thank you so much. If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. If you can hear me, clap 3 times. So, I've been around in the mesh credit world for a while, and I'm not particularly super excited about blockchains as I used to maybe 10 years ago. And so I'm very excited to hear Kyle's presentation, who runs MyChips, which is a mesh credit network that does not rely on a blockchain. Just to give you a bit of a teaser. Kyle, please take it away. The tally?
We're going to do this part. How are you? Everybody having a good time? Okay, don't yell it out, but if you know what this is, lift up your hand. Okay, if you don't know what this is, lift up your hand. Okay, so this is quite an informed audience. I've only found 2 people in my life back in the United States who have ever been able to look at one of these and figure out what it is, and a lot of people here know. Will you hold on to that? So it also looks like this in a little bit later iteration. And do you think you could hold this mic for me for a second, and so I can use my 2 hands? This is called a tally stick, and this was a payment form for about 800 years, from about the 1200s to the 1800s, at least in England, I know, and perhaps other places as well. And it has some interesting things about it. This piece on it is called the stock, and this smaller piece is called the foil, and you match these up by looking at the grain where the wood is split, and the notches are called chits, and they tell you how much this is worth. And it's a credit contract, and it's a form of money that was used for quite some time. If you know, in English, we have a thing called the stock market. We have stocks and bonds, and that's where this term has come from, is the stock, because you would give the stock in consideration of a purchase, and that was the part that was of value, the positive pledge of value. And the foil was the copy, carbon copy, to help you understand what that was. And we also have another idiom in English that says, I got the short end of the stick. That means that I was the one who ended up the debtor in the relationship. So that's pretty cool. And I like these as a reminder that private credit money has been used successfully for great periods of time throughout history. And really, it's only relatively recently where we have not had much of an active private credit money functioning. Now, we're going to do kind of a little interesting role play here to show you how the tally stick works. And we're going to demonstrate one of the problems with private credit money that has to be solved. And I call it the fungibility/trust trade-off. And so we'll do that next. So if you guys want to come up here. So let's start with maybe Alex on this end and Michael in the middle. And so we're going to set up a purchase, and Alex is going to purchase something from Michael. And so he's going to give him the stock, which is the big one, in consideration. And they've now made a promise. Now, this tally stick is a promise from Alex. And so he's the issuer of the money. He's the one that needs to be trusted in this relationship. And we're presuming that they know each other and they trust each other, and that's just fine. But at this point, Michael wants to buy something from Julio. And so we have a question: are these credits going to be transferable, or are they not going to be transferable? Now, if he tries to buy something by transferring that to Julio, now we've imposed a relationship, a requirement that Julio has to trust Alex, but Julio may not know Alex. He may not want to trust Alex. He may not have a basis for that. So that's kind of what we call the trust issue with private credits. And mutual credit kind of solves that in a different way. And MyChips solves it in a little bit different way. I think each of our systems tries to solve that in a little bit different way. So let's undo the transaction. Let's go back to where we were. I'm going to give you this one, and I'm going to give you this one. Now, we've been doing this exercise in different ways all week, so I'm not going to go into depth about what's happening here. But we're going to have a purchase. So the stock is going to go this way. Okay, we're going to have another purchase, but we're going to use a new issue. We're not going to use the same tally. We're going to use a new tally, and we're going to pay over here to Julio. And now we're going to go back the other direction. Okay, you can stay here, Julio, but just hand the stock down to Alex. No, wrong stock. Wrong stock. Oh, you switched? Did you switch? Okay. Okay, so we're good. So we have 3 different issues of currency going around the circle. Nice. That's awesome. Good deal. And so now we have kind of a fungibility issue. Is the purchasing, the normal way that purchases are happening is in this direction. And usually if you have somebody that you buy things from, that's usually not the same person that you're going to sell things to. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes that's convenient. But oftentimes we go to one person as our employer to get our income, and we go to a vendor somewhere else. So this is the fungibility problem. And we're solving it with what I call a credit lift in my chips, what has been referred to as credit clearing, which is kind of half of a credit lift, as we'll go into a little bit later. And what we need to do is get a way for these 3 people to agree, because we want to clear this credit out. Now, if 2 of them agree and the other one runs away in the middle of the transaction, we're going to be left damaged. And so Michael has an algorithm, and he and I kind of came up with a very almost identical algorithm independently. But he's going to demonstrate his algorithm in kind of an intuitive way, how we're going to undo this.
I'll try. Yeah, and we're not the only ones who came up with it. So Bitcoin Lightning uses a similar thing. Interledger uses a similar thing. And Ryan Fugger, when he invented original Ripple in 2003, first he said, well, okay, well, let's have a database server called Ripple Pay. But then later he said, well, wouldn't it be better if it was federated? But how could we do that? And then in 2008, he made a post to the mailing list. This was before Bitcoin. And he said, well, actually, with a hash lock, he didn't call it a hash lock, but he said, well, if we do some sort of riddle that if you can solve the riddle that acts as a delivery receipt, and then we do staggered timeouts, so we can do multi-hop with a hash lock. So here comes a bit of a computer science. I'm going to try to explain what a hash lock is. So I could think of 3 ways to solve this, right? Obviously, what we want is we want each person to keep their things, but to have their tallies back, so that we're clearing the debt loop. So one way would be to use a database, or we could all put our information in a database, and then you could just run a search through the database, say, oh, I could see a cycle there. Let's even that out. Another way would be with the blockchain. So you don't rely on a single database, and you don't have to trust one party that's going to clear all the debts for everybody. We say, oh, well, let's have a smart contract that we can all trust, and it's decentralized, etc. The third way, which I'll demonstrate here, is using peer-to-peer messaging. And that's the way we know how to do that, is with a hash lock. So first of all, I'll tell you that you can have your, this was your stock. You can have it back. You can keep my phone because you bought it. I'm happy with his phone. So that's all good, but we want to reset the debt loop. I'll give it back to you, but you have to promise me that within 30 minutes, you tell me the answer of the following riddle. If you can't tell me the answer within 30 minutes, then I'm going to keep the stock. Then you stay indebted to me. So the riddle is, what is pink, wet, and fast? Now, you have 30 minutes to solve that riddle. I'm already giving it back to you, but just conditionally. So I'm conditionally giving it back to you. And I trust you to So it's like that's what I do now.
Okay. So Julio, I'm giving you back this conditionally. If you tell me what is pink, wet, and fast.
Pink, wet, and
and fast.
Within 20 minutes.
Okay. So can I answer the riddle, or should I give you?
don't know the answer.
I don't know the answer.
yeah, I don't
Okay. So what do I do?
So you can give me my stock back conditionally,
Okay.
square one,
Okay.
on the condition that I,
Give me the answer.
okay.
What is pink, wet, and fast?
A flamingo in a bathtub on a train.
Ah.
Okay, so we're good. Okay, good. I got my stock back. I'm good. You still have the answer. 20 minutes left to.
So what's the answer? What's the answer?
A flamingo in a hot tub in the train.
You can keep my stock. Thank you. So now, okay, wait. So now I come to you.
Yeah.
And now,
I said I gave it conditionally to you.
yeah. So now I tell you about the flamingo and the hot tub and the fast train, and
Good. Okay. we're good.
I can keep you. Great.
So everybody has their stock back. I have a very nice phone. You have a very nice phone. You have a very nice bit of, and we did a trade, and we're all back at zero. So that's how a hash lock works. In a real system, usually they use the SHA-256 function. So I generate a random string, blah, 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 and then I say I take a one-way function to get another random looking string, and I say, can you tell me the pre-image of this hash? And then that's how you commit the conditional payment. But it's exactly the same. Like the hash is a riddle. Tell me what pre-image produces this riddle. So that's how hash locks work.
Kyle.
Good job. Thank you very much. So I like to make these tally stick replicas in order to go around and teach people about private credit. And I brought a bag of them that I'm not taking home as gifts. So there's not enough for everybody, but if you feel passionate about it, I'll give you one. And if you did not get one and you want to make contact with me, I will make you one and send you one. All right. Thank you. I also brought some t-shirts from the Got Choices Foundation. If anybody fits into or likes one of these t-shirts, let me know. If you'd love to collaborate with me on something, you definitely get a t-shirt. And if you don't want to collaborate with me and there are t-shirts left over, you definitely get a t-shirt. All right. It's been really a pleasure to be here. I come from a little bit different background, a little bit different story in my life than the rest of you. And so it's been particularly enlightening for me to hear your stories, to hear your projects, and to hear what you're doing. In fact, I heard in a Monday session that there was no such thing as free will, which scared me a little bit because for the last 10 years, I've been working on the Got Choices Foundation, which is all about free exercise of free will. So I wondered if I'd been wasting my time for the last 10 years. And then it occurred to me that this guy had every right to believe that there was not free will. He could choose to believe that there was not free will, and I could choose to believe that there is free will. And that's the wonderful thing about free will, is we all get to choose, isn't it? So that's what Got Choices is all about. And so why is Got Choices sponsoring a money project, you may ask? And back in 2014, I started writing a book, and I identified what I called 3 pivots, or you might want to call them levers in society or in the economy that are very powerful things by which we often find our free will infringed, our ability to exercise our free will infringed. And money is perhaps one of the biggest ones of those. The way money is designed, the way money is implemented, the way money is distributed, created, has the potential to be very unfair to people. That's not always unfair, as Alex pointed out. I think there's honest money out there, and I think there's dishonest money, but it has a huge potential for damaging people, and as some of the terminology was, for extracting value against the will of the people who are participating. So after I wrote that book, I was interested in how I could go about making a little better money system. Bitcoin was just coming along at that point. I studied Bitcoin. I'm a longtime computer programmer. I quickly became convinced there were some fatal flaws with public blockchain for implementing a worldwide currency, mostly scalability issues, but there were also some monetary theory issues that I disagreed with, and started trying to design my own system. And by the way, there are two other pivots in that system. And by the way, there are two other pivots in that book if you have any interest in learning about that. So I had prepared a presentation full of lots of economic theory, monetary theory, that's really been covered in depth this week. I'm not going to go into that. We're going to skim very quickly through the theory parts, and I'm going to give you just the parts that I think are most relevant to my chips and how it makes a difference to the design of my chips. These are some of the design criteria that I had when I wanted to say, gee, is there a better way we could make a market system, a market-based system? And by that, I mean individual people could issue currency. Alex talked about a lot of myths. I want to say one other myth that occurs to me is that banks make money out of nothing. Sometimes they do, but the honest money, they don't make money out of nothing. They make money out of us, Okay, we give a note to the bank gives us credit back. So we're the issuer at the end of the day. And we're in an age now where with Uber, we don't necessarily have to go through a taxi company. We're able to connect the driver and rider directly together. And I believe that we're in a technological age now where we can do the same thing with credit, is we can put the borrower and the creditor and debtor directly together, and we can plug them together, and we can bypass a lot of the overhead that's in the system. So in trying to make this system, we've talked about two different kinds of money. Credit money and commodity money is what we've been saying. I'm going to call it equity money. Why are there two different fundamental types of money? Why is that? How many people do we have in here that are trained accountants? What's the accounting equation? Okay, it's at the top of the screen right there. Assets equal liabilities plus equity. When you get into accounting, you learn that. You think, okay, that's great, I'll learn that. But I'm here to tell you this has deeper significance than just how to do your books. Assets, something of value, equals can be claimed by two fundamentally different types of things. One is a liability, which is denominated in a value. It's a fixed amount of debt with usually an interest rate attached to it. And equity. Equity is very different. Equity is ownership of the asset, and liability is a claim to value, which is backed by the asset. Okay, now it's important for us to understand why there are these two different types. When you go into the securities market, guess what? We have stocks and bonds. There's this natural division, okay? And I go into this in a lot more detail. I'm not going to belabor it, but I'll tell you that when we build money on the basis of equity, we have a certain set of features and benefits, and we have a certain set of problems to deal with. Same thing when we go into credit money, certain set of features and benefits, certain set of problems. Okay, let's talk about equity money for just a moment. And sorry, Alex, I drive Alex crazy because I use this terminology, but I've been using it for years, so it's a little hard to break. Equity money lives on the assumption of private property rights. We sometimes take that for granted, but if you're going to own something, your culture has to accept the notion of ownership. If I think I own this bicycle and all my neighbors don't agree that I own this bicycle, I don't own the bicycle, okay? There has to be this public consensus amongst the community that you own that bicycle, and there needs to be a way to understand that and honor that. The equity money tends to be a little more cumbersome, tends to be more of a tangible asset. Now, one of the reasons I call it equity money instead of commodity money is because I'm putting Bitcoin in this bucket, because Bitcoin is clearly not credit money. And so we're enlarging the concept of commodities to just include something that you can own. And Alex presentation helped us set the stage for that. It's rather difficult to digitize equity money. Bitcoin has found a way, and at some expense, has found a way to digitize the equity. The problem is that you end up with an equity that is not really worth anything. Now, I showed you the example of the split tally stick, which represents a credit agreement. This is my model of a public blockchain token in the same model. Okay, it's not a split tally. There's only one of them, and I can give it to someone if they think it's of value, if there's enough demand for it and they think it's valuable. This is kind of like a non-fungible token, maybe more than a Bitcoin analogy, but it gives us kind of the conceptual difference that we're dealing with. This is a monopole and credit is a dipole. They're two opposing pieces, so keep that in your mind. Okay, we're gonna go to the next one, which is credit money. This one also requires some kind of a cultural norm in order for it to have value, and that is that we have to understand the idea of a contract. We have to be able to make an agreement with another person, and not only does that contract have to be enforceable, but it has to be allowable. Okay, so sometimes governments will say, we're not going to even allow you to make that contract, and so you have to have a certain amount of freedom to make contracts, and then you have to have some way to enforce the contract. Now, I'm not saying you have to have a government necessarily to enforce the contract. A lot of times reputation is enough and trading relationship is enough. The stake that people have in the trading relationship can be enough to enforce that. It's much more nimble because a contract can easily be represented in a digital form and can easily be signed and validated in a digital form. It has the challenges of trust and fungibility, which we demonstrated for you up here at the beginning. And so we have to deal with those issues in the same way that blockchain has to deal with the double spending problem and the mining. You know, how are these tokens going to come into circulation? Well, we kind of invent this thing of mining so that there's a fixed supply and they can come in. We deal with how they're going to be issued. In private credit, we have to deal with trust and fungibility. Those are the two primary issues. Okay, so we're going to go on to the design. My top 3 priorities. Okay. I want you to understand that I'm trying to emphasize something here. What am I trying to emphasize and why? Why is scalability the key here?
Like I said on Monday, either we scale up or we go out.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Because that can be open.
Okay. And I almost put it in the opposite causal relationship, is that if it's open, it will be scalable, right? Why do we need something that is infinitely scalable? Okay, that's good. Now, if I just come out with something that is on a single database and I try to get subscribers, how far is that project going to go? You know? Yeah, and if I say, look, this is a proprietary system and you got to pay me a licensing fee, how far is that going to go? It's not, no matter how powerful you are, you're not going to be able to get the whole world to adopt this. So it has to be scalable. I've shown open protocol. I see that as a subcondition of scalability. It's a way of achieving scalability. Independence is a standalone issue that I feel very strongly about, is that my chips had to be independent. And by that, I wanted it to be independent of any other currency. I didn't want it to be pegged to a currency. I didn't want it to be dependent upon any architecture out in the cloud. I didn't want it to be dependent on any sort of libraries that were not open source, freely available. And I didn't want it to be based on any sort of authoritative addressing, such as DNS. Okay, so the protocol has been built so that as long as you can get on a network with an address that you can communicate with your trading partner somewhere else, at least intermittently, you'll be able to operate on this network, okay? So those are the design principles. Now, we have a prototype application that you can download. I'm showing you a screenshot from the app. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that is. We talked about the tally stick, and I have adopted the terminology of the split tally in implementing my chips. So we use that terminology. So when we are going to trade with someone, we are going to tally with them, or we were going to make a tally with them. And you can have a stock and a foil, and the stock is typically associated with the person who is selling, and the foil is associated with the person who's buying, okay? And what happens is you get into the app, you generate a barcode, and that's a tally invitation. You communicate that barcode to somebody in what I call an out-of-band communication, and it does not go through the protocol. So you need to email it to them, or you need to text it to them, or you can show it to them on a computer screen, in a video conference, anything like that that you want to do. This is the key, and they can scan that on their app, and then that forges the connection with a one-time connection token. What happens as we build these connections is we build the network of trust. I'm not going to go through all of these features one by one. We've all seen these graph networks that are built. I will tell you that it's possible to quantify at each level of the network. It's possible to quantify the amount of trust, quantified in chips. And when you say, I trust you 10, you're saying a couple of things with that. You're saying that you may pay me up to 10, and I will issue you net credit terms. For example, net 30 is going to be very common in the contracts that will be embedded in my chips. That means that it's interest-free during that period of time, as long as you reconcile out or redeem that back out during that period of time. And it also says I'm prepared to lose 10 from you. And I don't know if this maybe addresses your question a little bit, is, how do I take that risk? So you need to in your mind say, I'm prepared to lose 10. But when I lose 10, you're going to lose connectivity to the network. Okay, that cuts you off. And so there's an incentive for you to honor the 10, because that's how you honor that relationship. And it's also how you're going to get access to the rest of the network. There are also some other things that are reputation-based that can be add-ons to this that can harm the reputation of the person who breaks that trust. Every person in the network, in order to function, really needs to have what I will call one upstream tally and one downstream tally. So upstream tally is one where we traditionally get paid, and a downstream tally is one where we traditionally pay. Now, having said that, there are some exceptions. The balance on these tallies can go in either direction. So just because we call it upstream or downstream is just kind of a convention that we set. But you can carry a balance in either direction on any tally. If two people want to join just together and they have a bilateral trading relationship, they can do that with one tally each. So if you have a guy that you go to lunch with periodically, you guys can establish a tally, and you can keep your lunch tab back and forth. And so my chips will work in an ecosystem of two people to 2 billion, 8 billion, however many you want to add. And as new people come on, they're going to bring their own storage and their own processing power to the game. Okay, as you establish these trading relationships, they're going to show up on your app. And we're looking at what's called a tally view. And you can see at the very top, this person has 76 chips. And if we go into a special session talking about the chip valuation, I don't know if you have any interest in that. That's one of the afternoon sessions I proposed. If we do one of those, I can go into all kinds of things about what a chip is and what it's worth and how we value it. But you can see the chip there. And then because I'm from the US, I can choose to also display those in dollars if I want to. And I can come up with my own conversion for the chip, or I can rely on an estimate that is part of the system if I want to. If I click a certain button, I can see a graph view of my relationships, okay? So this person in the middle, and I call this a visual balance sheet. What I wanted to have is something that would give someone a quick visual understanding of kind of where they stand with their trading partners. So you can kind of see your net worth in the very middle. You can see assets and liabilities on the next ring. And then on the outer rings, you can see the individual tally balances and whether they're in the blue or in the red. And then you can see your trading partners. And that obviously could become a very busy graph if you have hundreds of trading partners. May not be feasible for certain things, but for simple ones, it is very helpful. Now I want to talk about the notion of a site. A site is a database. Okay, we mentioned that we wanted this to be scalable. And so in order to be scalable, it is almost 100% completely distributed. Now, for those of you who are programmers who understand the difference between centralized, decentralized, and distributed, if you have a question about that, come and talk to me after. I'll show you the topology. But essentially, the mesh network is distributed. And in all cases except one, where Mikhail said after 30 minutes, this is going to go dead, I have a very tiny bit of ad hoc centralization that enters in order to say, when is the 30 minutes up? And by ad hoc, I mean those three people would choose a referee at the very beginning of the transaction. And that's one little tiny piece of centralization that is entered in. And with that, we can make a transaction that is safe and live. So if we look at a site, we're going to see this site has 4 different users on it. And you can see a couple of connections there that go from user to user within the same site. If you get a rich enough topology within a site, you can do lifts. And again, when I use the word lift, I'm talking about a clearing function plus, which we'll explain in just a minute or two. So I can do lifts within a single site, or I can have segments where I can participate in distributed lifts with other people. And you saw a distributed lift here with the, what do you call it? The hash lock, but you had a whispering merchants protocol on his website. So when you get a series of sites or databases, it looks kind of like this. So I have site A, site B, site C. We've looked at node graphs with individual people. What MyChips does is it then zooms out and it looks at individual databases as though they're nodes in a larger, maybe more simplified graph network. And so let's look at user B2, who has a credit imbalance that he wants to clear. He can send a message. The agent that is running the site can send a message up to A3 through B1 and say, hey, is there any chance that you know where B3 is from your perspective? And that Whisper protocol can work its way up through the network. It gets split into many different pieces as it goes, and it either finds a destination or it doesn't. If it doesn't find a destination, then other forces will kick in. But if it finds a destination, goes through the cloud, comes back around up through C3, and C3 says, yes, absolutely, we do know about B3. He's not on our site, but we know how to get to B3. That message is propagated back and cached on site B. And there's a large pathway table that can maintain a database of possible paths. When we're ready to do the actual lift, we send a riddle, we send a cryptographic hash out, and if that hash makes it all the way around the circle, that's the phase 1 commit. Phase 1 of that's phase 1 of the lift. And if it comes back with the proper signing, that's the phase 2. Okay, so that's kind of how that works. Now I want to talk a little bit about lifts and how they are different. MyChips, I think, goes a little bit beyond some of the discussion that I've heard so far this week. Specifically, I've heard about credit clearing as something that we really want to net to zero. That we really, these credit imbalances, they're promises, but we kind of need to get rid of them. We need to clear them. We need to smash them down. We need to get them all to net to zero. And in the process of doing that, I guess what we're doing is we're working our way towards some other ultimate reward in the system, and that might be fiat currency, that might be Bitcoins, that might be something else that we're trying to get to. MyChips takes a little bit different view and says, I don't necessarily want to net all of the credits to zero. I want to put the credits where I want to put the credits. Okay, so we have a graph right here of just 4 simple trading partners. Assume you are B and credits or payments are coming to you from A. What is your relationship with A? What is A to you? Yes. Okay, a client. Did you hear that? So you are selling services. You could call it a client or an employer, depending on how you're thinking about that relationship. So A is paying B and B is paying C. So if I accumulate a bunch of credits here on the plus sign of B, what are those good for? If your employer keeps giving you promises, those are not really that valuable to you. Actually, they are in MyChips, but I'll explain that in a minute. But where the credits might be more valuable is down with C, which is your grocery store, where you like to buy your food. Okay, so what you do is you go into your settings, and I'm going to just jump to another screen here for just a second. You go into your settings and you say, you know, I really would like to accumulate 1,000 chips down there on C, and I really don't want to have more than about 100 at any time on this A. So those parameters go into the algorithm, and as lift opportunities come through, those are honored, and eventually those credits will transform. I call it transmute. They kind of disappear out of one side and they reappear on the other side in the format that you want. This is a live graph that kind of what I use to generate the algorithm, and it's live. You can experiment with it and set the parameters. So this tally balance is saying that the client right now owes the vendor 660 chips, and then we have a target, and you just say, you know, I really would like to have about 400 chips on this tally all the time. You know, I'd be totally happy having 400 there. And over on the left side, we can see what size lift can be accommodated through this. Those parameters are embedded into the database, and so you can calculate the lift capacity of a channel at any point in time. No, they don't have to. And it's beautiful. And it'd take me a long time to get into that. But you can set your target. You are not guaranteed to have your target, but there is a thing called a clutch. And I'm not going to go into those today. It's quite a lot. But there's a thing called a clutch. And think of clutch as grabbing. You can say, you know, I really, really want to hang on to these. And if they go away, I want a fee. Okay, that's kind of what this means. So you have lift pathways that are free, and you have lift pathways that are at potential cost. And if you really, really need to push something through a difficult pathway, you have the option to push uphill, as it were, something that somebody is not their preference, but they're willing to for a cost. You can push money through at a cost. But if I owe you money, so right now 660, it's free for me to take that 660 back to zero, because that's an IOU. I owe you, so I have to honor that. I have to honor the terms of that. If I go beyond that 660, now I have to start to honor these other preferences that are put in place. But because the client target is at 400, right now I can go from 660 all the way to 400, which is the 1060 up there on the left where it says a normal lift. A normal lift can be done for 1060, and then at a cost, I can go another 400 up to that 800. So it's fairly complex, and this happens at each node in the network, and so the system can calculate a lift capacity all the way through. Any questions about that before I go off that slide? So for me, the lift is more than just a payment system. We're not accumulating credits just with the hope that I can get them put back to zero. We're accumulating credits in order to use them to buy things. That's money. Okay, so that's why I think this qualifies as money if we use it as money. Now, I won't say that this is where you're going to store your long-term value, and there is a strategy here for even creating chip loans, chip mortgages. And so, for example, if you're living on more of a day-to-day way, and you have savings, you have the potential for savings, there's a way for you to lift money into a credit line, which is in association with a car or a house or something else. And so you can gradually peel value off of this. And instead of saying, I'm going to store my value in fiat currency, you can store your value in your home. You can store your value in a tangible asset. But very much for 30, 90 days, for months at a time, you can store temporary value right in the chips. And you would normally do those with the vendors that you have day-to-day business with, and you can spend that money as you need to. Now, I mentioned that you might not want to accumulate credits from your employer up here, A. Now, I'm going to give you the exception to that. If your employer is a very solid company and you're very comfortable with that, it's a great place to store your credits. And you can save them. And instead of doing a clearing function, which is a circle, you can do what I call a linear lift. Okay, it's a ripple payment. The linear lifts always go upstream of the arrows. And so you can make a payment from B to A to D, and you can pay someone who you don't know. Now, by storing those credits in your A tally, that facilitates those payments very easily. So you can pay lots of people you don't know from the credits that you're storing up in your A tally. You can pay C very easily from the credits that you're storing in the C tally. You can also pay people you don't know with the C tally. It'll work either direction.
Would A need a money transfer license to facilitate that?
So I don't know how to tell you about other laws besides the United States. That's beyond my scope, but I will tell you that we're studying this very carefully, and I do have a legal opinion that has been written, and we believe that this falls under the what we call safe harbor under the SEC regulations in the United States. And it says this is a net credit. This is a net 30 credit line established in the normal course of business, and that the people, at least of the United States, have the free right to associate with each other and set up these kind of credit relationships. So we're hopeful that it's going to be great. Now, every country is going to have their own political issues to deal with. Great. So you're storing value in credit-based contracts, and it doesn't necessarily have to be something that you're clearing to zero. Listen, I've gotten to the substantive end of what I had. I wanted to leave a little bit of time for question and answers, and I also wanted to be able to show you some areas that you could go for other information. I will say that if you'll go to mychips.org, that's kind of a clearinghouse for information there. You can find the original book. You can find the MyChips papers. You can find the study on the Lift algorithm. It's a mathematical proof of the Lift algorithm and why it's cryptographically safe and why it can be counted on to complete. This is where we are in the project. It's not ready to be used yet commercially, but it's getting close. I would love to have collaboration with people who can help me get it there. A great deal has been done in the substantially complete category. We're working on the mobile app. That's really the biggest thing right now, and there are a few things in the back end that need to be finished, that need to be brought in. The back end is complete enough that it will run in a simulated mode, and there is a simulator, and it's possible for you to download the software if you're interested, run the simulator, launch any number of instances. It can generate data sets, and it can show lifts. So at this point, I think we have about 13 minutes. Julio, tell me what our time is. How much do we have? Will you stop us when we should stop having questions? Okay, so are there any questions you want me to go into? Maybe not. Oh,
value of the chips against the other. So it should be stable. So
okay, that is a big question that I won't have a lot of time to answer here, but if we go into the chip valuation, I will answer that in depth. But I will say that each tally has an encoded contract in it. And the contract is a written document that you can print out. And we hash that document, incorporate it into the hash of the signed hash that you agree to. And so it is a legal document and can be enforced if you share a jurisdiction with the person that you're working with. In that document, it says this is what a chip is. And it's about 6 bullet points that describes what a chip is. And so I will say it has the definition, which is better than $1. It's not quite as easy to define what a chip is as it is to say what an ounce of gold is. But if we go into that discussion, I'll explain in some depth a bit more about what a chip is. Okay, Dil?
Hi. Thank you very much. Really, top-notch stuff. Cory Doctorow wrote a book called Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom, which is great fun. And in it, he imagines a reputation currency. This is a little bit of a build-up, but I get there quite quickly, I promise. A couple of years later, he wrote a blog post saying, "This is a terrible idea. Don't do this. Just because I wrote a book, don't think that I'm doing this." And he describes in that blog post the eBay long con. And the eBay long con is you set up 3 or 4 eBay accounts, which are free to set up, and you do lots of trades round them for $10 each. And you get a nice big eBay score. And then you say, oh, look, I've been doing all these little things, but now I've got my car to sell and it's $10,000. But look, I've got a really high reputation. You can read all my reviews, blah, blah, blah.
Is your question, can I do that on my chips?
Well, my question is about your governance mechanism when someone fails. So you said, if you say you trust them for 10, and if they fail, they get thrown out.
They don't get thrown out, they get disconnected by you.
Only disconnected by you.
Yes.
Right.
Now, there are some add-ons that we could go into maybe in a different setting where it is possible, not through this protocol, but externally to set a reputation for that person. But that's not what we're going into here. The point is they lose their connection from you, and that's the end of the consequence at that point.
You have an answer to the long con problem.
Well, that problem.
You don't have to prove it to me, I believe you, if you say
that
you
problem does not exist because you don't execute tallies with people based on their reputation.
Okay.
Period. You execute with them because you know them already. Yeah, let's take one right here and then we'll come back to Mikhail.
Thank you for the presentation. Pretty amazing, and like being tally fan, I really want. Could I have one later? Like
yes, you can.
Thanks. Yeah, I was also interested in how you deal with failure, and but if I understood right, is basically all a bilateral agreement system where I decide how much I trust somebody, and based on that, I'm basically acknowledging that trust is risk, and if so at the other end, so the foil. Right? Foils, I'll take the loss.
You will take the loss.
So it's pretty, in this sense, like a sovereign
Yes.
sort of system where all agents take full responsibility on trust.
And it is not
risk.
it is not amortized across the
There's
community.
no like
Correct.
risk sharing buffers.
Correct. And that's how we achieve zero inflation.
And so
That's
you're
important.
connecting that to issuance. And the
If you
issuance
issue it
protocol.
and you default, the failure stops right there.
Okay.
And by the way, a tally can function on zero trust in one direction. It does need non-zero trust in at least one direction, but you can have zero trust in one direction.
How are you solving? Is there any Sybil resistant mechanism so I don't go and like fail once and try again. Like, of
With-
course, in real life wouldn't work.
Yeah.
So,
If it's with a new person, every time there's not a built-in mechanism, that would have to be an external reputation problem. But essentially, if you know the person, if you're executing tallies only with people that you have a relationship with, you know who the person is. And because you have a legal document, you may actually be able to go to court and collect.
So is there some sort of Ricardian contract underneath?
Yes.
So there's
Yes.
there's a
Yes.
possibility for legal recourse.
There's more than just a Ricardian contract. Is there's a contract with a chain of contracts, and it's very contracty. There's lots in there that you can print out and show what you agreed to, and you can actually list collateral. You can attach collateral to as long as this is legal in your jurisdiction, the platform will allow you to do it.
So it's basically a platform of private contracting.
Yes.
And like the transitive nature of it
Yeah.
makes some externalities possible.
There is
Okay?
one little evil hook in the licenses. If you purposely cheat your partner, you have violated the open source license.
Well, that's a nice twist.
Little hook. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Okay. Michael, did you have one?
Do you think there will be market makers on the chip network? And if so, do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
So I think that's similar to the question Dill asked in the previous session. I do think there will be market makers. I think having large players will be just fine as long as the protocol stays open and as long as people have the opportunity to compete with those market makers. I think that'll be great. There are a couple of things, is I think there are going to be some built-in limits to how big you can make this database, at least with my reference implementation. Now, somebody will get really smart and they'll figure out how to mega scale this. But right now, the way you scale it is by creating more databases, not by creating a mega database. And it's going to slow down quickly if you put, 1 million users in a database. I don't think you could even keep up. It's going to be hard. So I think there'll be some built-in incentives to scale this as a network as opposed to making mega providers. One last one.
Hey, thank you. Sorry if you covered this already. Is there any localized or globalized view of the state changes in the system that the participants have access to based off of their local trust networks?
Are you asking if the entire system state can be seen from a global standpoint?
Yes.
The answer is no. Each site only knows about its own state, and that's it.
Would they be able to interoperate with other local networks of trust?
Yes. So for example, my hope is that with all the projects that I hear you working on, I would love to see my chips go into one of these projects, because if there's a neighboring project that's also using it, the minute those are up and running, you're going to have interoperability between the two. And if you get a third one, it's going to go up by more than that. There's going to be synergies there that it's going to go up at a more than a linear rate of utility.
That's awesome. Yeah, we should definitely connect later.
Okay. Thanks a lot for your questions.
Thank you. Thank you. So now we have technical challenges before lunch. So maybe just some logistical things. We will have the last session on technical challenges of mesh credits with the bits possessed and moderated by Michelle. Alex and Kyle will also part. Then we will go to lunch and we come back here at 3 for the open sessions to decide what we're going to do for the afternoon. So please come back at 3 after lunch. So give it up for the next session.
I'm going to ask you to do the same thing as Julio did. So I want you to stand up and stretch a little bit, because this is the lowest energy point before lunch, I think. Whoop. Yes, are we ready? very small notes. Very small notes on the. Okay. Yes. How do you switch? Okay. So we're going to talk about some technical challenges with the UBI Circles UBI system. We are here from the Bits Possessed Freelancer Collective. We are developers maintaining the Circles UBI system. I'm Louise. This is Yuna, and this is Juanen. We also have Jackie here. There she is. And we have one more developer, Miko, who is not with us here in Austria. So just to repeat some of the things that Julio introduced to us earlier, there are some inherent features of like how Circles operates to be able to well, it is a mesh credit system in the sense that it's like a regular issuance of UBI. In each of the users have their own tokens, and by trusting someone in the network, you're giving value to their UBI tokens. Because you have individual tokens and you have trust, you also need paths, just like in the other examples here. And we have transitive transactions, which is similar to the Lyft. And yes, we will get back to how these affect the technical challenges in each of these parts.
So let's say that Circles is a protocol. The Circles protocol is a set of smart contracts that live in or that are deployed in a blockchain. We use the blockchain because of its security and distributed properties. So we don't maintain the infrastructure where this lives. And even if our services die, the smart contracts and all the transactions history stay until until the chain disappears or whatever, or internet collapses. So Gnosis chain is a side chain of Ethereum, so it's Ethereum virtual machine, and the smart contracts is like the program that is executed in this virtual machine, which has some advantages, but the disadvantages is that running the program costs money and is slow. So for helping like to create a useful application, which is like Circles Garden, and then we can do a install party or a Circles party to connect to each other. So in order to have this app that is usable, we need intermediate services, which are Web2 services, and they are needed for different reasons. So for example, let's start with the pathfinder. So all the calculations of finding the paths, because the restrictions of the trust limits are written in the hub contract. The hub contract is what defines the rules of this transitive and yeah, so it's the trust limits, also is it's a key value store where is the list of all the accounts and their tokens, because every user has their own token. Then there is the safe and the token that represents each account. So okay, so all the calculations to find these paths are done not in the blockchain, but in a service. It's a mathematical algorithm. And the hub, what only does is validating and say, okay, this path is correct. It makes sense inside the blockchain balances and everything. So it can be validated and it can be real. And then we use the safe because it's a powerful tool that it gives also security and yeah, it's a multi-sig account. So with your safe is a smart contract. So you can sign transactions with your Ethereum account, and you can configure it in a way that you need, for example, 3 signers to send this transaction to the blockchain. So it's a way of security, because if you lose your keeper, you can remove this for controlling the safe. And then the token is where the issuance, the UBI. So the token has a public method where when you call it, you generate you mint the tokens based on time. Okay, so we need the Pathfinder to find this path. Then there's some user data that is not on-chain, because also storage in the blockchain is expensive. So we have it in a centralized place. It can be improved, but now it's like this. And then we have a blockchain indexer, because all the balances and the trust connections are in the transactions. But in order to have this information fast and be able to process it, we need an indexer. And we also have a relayer, because since we have to pay the transactions with XDAI, with the native token of the blockchain, and this is something that we don't want the users to be involved in, because the objective is that they use Circles. So the Circle scope pays for all the transactions for everyone. So we need a service that does this payment for everyone. So this is our infrastructure, and this is challenging. So we are going to explain one by one, like the most important challenges. So what I said, for paying the transaction fees, paying the gas fees, we need XDAI, in our case, because we are in the Gnosis chain. So our current approach is decentralized service, which is a queue with all the requests of the transactions of the users. So this is obviously a bottleneck, so there is a scalability. And also it's an external dependency, because we haven't built this software. It's not easy building it. So this is another challenge. So right now, where we are looking is into other possibilities of other implementation of relayers, or the other possibilities, instead of I pay the transaction for you through meta transaction, I give you a little bit of XDAI, and you can pay for your transactions over 1 year. But this might be exploitable, so we have to be careful. Next, the pathfinding.
Yes. So there's a lot of challenges with the pathfinding, and it has been one of our major headaches. So this picture again that Julio also showed is that the capacity to transfer flows in the other direction than the trust. And this is quite straightforward. Like when these people sign up, they have their own initial UBI, but over time you will hold different people's tokens. And this graph will be significantly more complex. And as the community grows, the number of coins you hold, the number of capacities to other nodes will grow exponentially. So finding these paths, especially over time when the network has been used for a long time, becomes mathematically complex. And yeah, it requires computational power. And at the moment, we are using a maximum flow algorithm that has traditionally been applied to traffic flows or water flows to calculate how much flow can happen through different nodes. But yeah, they are challenging in like, how do we calculate this path faster if we don't need to send a maximum? There's a lot of options and tweaks into how do we find these and how do we apply them? Do we want to favor returning coins to their original owner? And yeah. And this is also like a central service. It's not offered in a decentralized manner. So it's also a fragility of the system in that sense. And to be able to do the pathfinding, we also need very accurate indexing, because in the blockchain, we have the balances in each node and we have the trust connections. But we don't have this capacity network of where can we make transactions.
Can I ask a question? So you say, do we want the coins to return to their owner? You pose that as a question. So I'm curious what your answer is. So what is your, when you have so if there's only one path, then you take that one. But if there are two paths, which one do you choose? Do you favor a longer one, or do you favor some, I don't know, somebody who hasn't been in a path for a long time, so now it's your turn? Or which choices does your algorithm make there?
I think it favors the first one it finds. I cannot really answer what the algorithm favors. It returns to the owners and favors the shortest one. Yeah. Yes. Yes. We are not the developers of the Pathfinder algorithms ourselves, so that's also why some questions I don't. But yes.
Thanks.
Good. Thanks. This has also changed over time, right? Before it didn't do this. So we have done, or there has happened a lot of pathfinding optimization. It didn't do this. So we have done, or there has happened a lot of pathfinding optimizations in the last half year in the Circle systems that has improved the ability to send transactions greatly. But yeah, the indexing of the blockchain data is very important, because with every transaction or new trust or taking back trust, this capacity network changes. And then if you have calculated the path before this happens, the path will be invalid. So it's essential that the indexing happens very fast and is reliable. Yes, and we have one final limitation of transitive transactions, which is that in each block, there is a gas limit of how much can fit in this block. And the more steps you have in one transaction, the more gas it uses. So there's like a fixed limitation to how many steps we can have. Yes.
Then the typical challenges related to Web3 that are mostly related to delays. So we have to wait for the transaction to be valid, even for a few blocks. Then we need to wait for this, the delay of the indexing, which is another service. And then, for example, the smart contracts are immutable. So once you deploy it, this is the contract, right? So we have found, for example, that trust limits first because of in the design. So they were designed in the protocol, like in the smart contract level, but they weren't designed in the application. So they were not used. That's why we said we set up a fixed 50% of trust by default. But we didn't let the user configure it. And in practice, the trust limit in our smart contract means that I can receive, if I trust you 50%, means that I can receive at most as 50% of 50% of the quantity of I hold of my own tokens. So we are creating like a very big limitation, because what if I don't have any more tokens because I have exhausted all my UBI of my own tokens, and also it's a for the transitive transactions it's like very restrictive. So we decided, okay, we don't want trust limits. So first, let's change all the trust to default 100%. But the second step is removing it from the hub that validates the transactions through the web of trust. But for changing the smart contracts, we have the problem of governance, who decides what is the new implementation of the contracts, because of course this is a community decision, and also there is the COP, the Circles COP, who is dynamizing in Berlin. Then there is different technical development teams who are also contributing, so the whole community who decides on how. And then migrating to the new contracts is also a challenge, because we want to preserve the history and translate it. So it's not straightforward. Very interesting. Then the web of trust is not anonymous. So there is a team, which is a research development team, that is working on an anonymous version of the web of trust of Circles. They are called Circles Entropy. They are here. And they are going to propose open space in case, so they can explain better all this.
Yeah. So now everything we talk about wouldn't make sense, would be pointless if it's not like a source code publicly published. So here are our our repos in GitHub, so you can see the code and contribute if you want to and you dare to. Just to comment that the system can be forked. As we commented, the principal layer is the blockchain, but you can replicate the layer for the client side, as well with all those libraries that we already prepared and we're already using and maintaining. And just say that Bitpossessed is maintaining the Circles Garden project, but in Bali, there's another like pilot maintaining by the Gnocchi team from Gnosis. And yeah, we're like developing together and taking the decisions together, all the technical stuff.
And yeah, here is the link to the app itself where you can sign up, and our handbook, which contains some information about the system. But I also want to say, like, when advertising for open space sessions, that us as the Bitpossessed collective, we also want to hold a session about how we organize ourselves in our collective. So you're very welcome to vote for that or come to that. No? Yes?
Sorry. Here you have the Circles Garden app, so you can just check it out, give it a try. You can sign up. You need like 3 connections to be trusted by 3 people. So I think that this space is like the best opportunity to try it out and trust each other. And yeah, get your UBI, yeah, and really, we're so like, thank you very much for listening and for this kind of space to talk. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Bits Possessed?
Are you interested in running this in different substrates, or it has to follow the stack that you've created on top of Ethereum, on top of like, because it's essentially the graph operations that you're doing to clear credit. It's an essentially distributable algorithm that is being run in a centralized ordered execution virtual machine, losing all of the potentiality of the distributed algorithm.
Yeah. No, we have had a lot of conversations about alternatives to the stacks, and I think we're open to alternatives, both like in terms of the blockchain itself, which chain we're running on, but also we have talked about how can we store the user data, for example, in a distributed manner. And yeah, also the other services like getting rid of a relayer is also like a step towards decentralization.
Because what I've been noticing also in all the different utilizations of mesh credit from the different people is different implementations of the same distributed credit clearing algorithm. And what I am sort of implying in a proposal to the community is the creation of a shared protocol that is configurable, because I'm starting to see the different configurations, like from the pathfinding, the routing, some including to the model funding paths depending on length of debt or interest. Other projects completely ignore that and say there's no interest, there's no payment terms, but then you choose by other criteria. So basically, what I'm starting to see is a shared protocol that can be configured for different networks, and it's basically this piece of the protocol becomes a configurable mesh credit protocol that can be applied for different subnetworks. But most importantly, if we share the protocol, everyone that is using mesh credit becomes inherently interoperable. So, yeah.
Let's do a session about that. No? No, like an open space.
Yes. Any more questions about this session? Yeah.
So I was just wondering, like, how do you implement window guidance? Like, is that implemented, or are you planning to implement that? Mhm. Okay, so that's not implemented. So
It's more of like, where does the co-op choose to cooperate? Which businesses do we integrate?
We have a team that's called the CATS, the Community Activation Team, and they are in charge of organizing with the businesses about, how to do this type of guidance. No, we did that in the last session, but it's not in the protocol itself. It's more like a economic sort of politics. Yeah.
The protocol we said is the smart contracts, right? So the protocol is the trust limits, the UBI issuance in the token, and actually we don't have to use a safe. Anyone could be signed up in the hub in any Ethereum account. But in the hub there is the restrictions of the trust network and the trust limits. This is really what is Circles protocol. Yeah, and then you can configure the initial amount of token that you have, the demurrage, the period of the demurrage, right now, as far as we know, there's only one hub, but anyone could create another hub with other rules, even fork the code.
There is also a deeper level of protocol in the white paper that could be implemented in, I mean, non-blockchain even. So, yeah.
Cool.
And the white paper you can find in the handbook that we.
So if there's any more questions for Circles, you can ask them during lunch. So let's thank the speakers again. And we were planning another whole panel session now that we don't have time for anymore. But I did want to say one last thing about routing, which I think is interesting, at least from a computer science point of view. Is that stable? Yeah, so the way I understand routing, so previously we showed how the hash lock works. That's a decentralized way to make the, to do multi-hop in a network, which could be multi-hop payments or multi-hop multilateral credit clearing. But in order to get there, like a truly network architecture for a network mesh credit economy, you also need to find these paths, of course. And one thing you could do is have a bird's eye view of the network and then look for paths like MCTS does. And that's obviously maybe the only sane approach, but I'd like to also talk about some insane approaches. There are another option if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to create a bird's eye view, say we really want to have messages go through the network and based on gossip find routes, then a smart thing to do is to have addresses for the different regions of the network. So you say you have a network here, you say, well, this region is called something, and then you have routing tables which say, if you want to go there, then you can go through me. And there, what Interledger does is it has these routing tables, just like MyChips, and then it has liquidity curves of how much it. So it will tell you the more you want to set, the more you want to arrive at the destination, the more expensive it will be, and so higher amounts will have. So these go out. They are nonlinear. So because you're going to exhaust the network by sending big payments through them, but smaller payments will be easier. The easier way to say is if you have a trust line here, the money can go back and forth on that trust line, and you would have a linear cost function. So I think that's what ETS assumes, that you always want each trust line to go to the center, and then the best path is the one that moves as many trust line credit lines as possible to their center. So a big loop would be preferable over a small loop. So you can get a suboptimal routing if you find this small loop first and you clear it, and this link disappears because it goes to zero, then you would no longer be able to do this big loop. So you arrive in a local optimum. But another way of doing that, and the way we want to do it in ledger loops, is to say, well, maybe I have we can always talk about it. And what Kyle also said, I may want to be in the middle, or maybe I want to be here, I want to have some credit here, but I'm willing to move uphill if you pay a fee. So then you enable market making, because you say, well, you can let money throw through me, but a little bit less will arrive on the other side, and that's how I make a profit. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. Maybe it's unavoidable. We have to build the most capable system and then build in some transparency to make sure that people don't get rich just by extracting money from the network. And the last thing I wanted to say about this is the idea of the ratchet and alternate current that Kyle and I also talked about. So if you have suppose you have resolved this small loop, and now you think, damn, Now this one's at 0, this link is gone. I really wanted to do this big loop. Then you can still say, okay, guys, I know you just resolved your small loop, but if you're willing to move uphill, then to undo what you just did, then you're going to make a lot of people happy. And of course, you can say, well, I'm willing to pay you 11 if you're willing to forward 10. And this link has some capacitance. There's a level of trust back and forth. So the trust from this one and this one, plus the trust in the opposite, that's the maximum movement that it can make. And maybe if you pay a little bit extra fee, you can push it a little bit more. So it's not a hard boundary, but it's just, it gets steeper and steeper. The thing you can do then is you could move this circle back and forth by doing, going in alternate current. And then, sorry, you want to move this one in this direction, and you want to move this one in this direction. So when this circle moves, the credit here goes that way. And when this circle moves, it goes back. So over here, you have a direct current that goes around sort of the outside of both circles. And in here, you have a small ratchet that just goes back and forth all the time. So that's the ideas we've been thinking about building. Haven't built that yet, but yeah.
Minor critique of this. We are on an event called Collaborative Finance. And for 3 days, I'm listening about market making. Hopefully by Sunday, you will stop doing markets. This stuff can be implemented collaboratively. Forget about pricing. Think about sharing. So all this stuff, all this liquidity provision can be done, can be encoded in the network. You can charge transaction fees and then share the proceedings with liquidity providers. This is a collaborative way. Don't market, collaborate.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add one point of nuance. I think these tools are interesting because they're bridges, and we can use them to define new ways for these sorts of markets to operate. We can make them obey different rules and thus change the entire structure of them. So I think it's difficult in these transition periods where we're using old words to describe new things. But I think markets bring sort of that bottom-up emergence that, capitalist versus communist state plan versus like market planned economy. There was obvious benefits to the bottom-up emergence of the market dynamic. However, we've seen this total extraction by, the capitalist class or the vectorial class, I think, in capturing the profits of that system because there's this race to the bottom. The interesting thing, and what we're talking about here, I think, are controlled markets, designed markets, so that we can ensure flow, circularity, inertial mass in these systems. But I think it's always going to be tricky. There's a lot of these semantic tripwires because we're using words that other people interpret in a different way. But I think we need to leave some space for the emergence of blends of these spectrums, because a lot of these aren't necessarily binaries, but it's a design space. I really like that, what Dil said, that there's a lot of context that we can explore with these new tools.
So thank you so much for your attention. We were a bit slow, but that's fine. Please have lunch, enjoy, and talk to us if you want to know more. And let's think together about how we can integrate all the systems.